record now so that I don't forget. If you would rather not be in the recording at all, it's totally fine to turn your camera off. Um, okay, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, can you guys see my slides? Can I see the chat still? Too many windows. Can I get a thumbs up on the slides? Sweet. Thank you so much. All right. Welcome everybody. It's so great to see you. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. I want to start a little bit with a little exercise. So take a look at this. Make your slides go. Oh, before we begin, if you want to follow along with the slides, you can. They live online. So you can go to jennyslides.netlify.app/WTF, that's what they forgot, tools. And you can follow along today or just bookmark it to come back to later. I will put this link in again at the end. All right, so I want you to take a look at this word cloud and think about how you're feeling about your research project today.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Um, I think your mic is on, Catherine. Okay. So have a think about how you're feeling about your research project today. Pick a couple of these emotion terms, and pop, if you're comfortable sharing, pop them in the chat. What does your emotional state in relation to your research look like today? There is some anxiety, confusion, oh, and excitement. I like this. The juxtaposition of confusion and excitement is a good place to be, Jessie. Excited, hopeful, but also uncertain. Yes, that absolutely makes sense. What else do we have? Overwhelmed, daunted, hopeful, curious, uncertain, out of your depth, curious, but sometimes confused. Yeah, that's a good combination too, right? So these emotions absolutely make sense, right? I want you to try this question again, this time framing it in terms of what you want to feel when you think about your research. Or maybe you could reframe it in terms of what do you need to feel in order to do good research work, right? So have a look at that word cloud again and give me an idea of aspirational emotional states for where do you want to be in terms of a feeling state? Confident, capable, focused, hopeful, confident, connected. Yes, at ease. I like it, right? So, what I'm noticing from this little exercise is that there is a little bit of a gap, right? So, as I'm just going to minimize that so I can see more things. Um, there's this gap. And as you embark on a new research project, it totally makes sense that you're feeling overwhelmed and confused and a little bit out of your depth. But you know that in order to do good work, ideally, you would like to feel confident and capable and inspired, right? So, where does this gap come from? I'm going to tell you that it's not a you problem. I think it's a system problem. So, the reason that you're feeling overwhelmed is that your training thus far has not prepared you particularly well for the task that you are about to begin. Research training is full of what I call the hidden curriculum. You've learned lots about psychology research that other people do, but there's not a lot of practical training in how to do research when you become a researcher. You're just expected to kind of just know. Or if you don't know, the expectation is that you'll work it out along the way, trial and error, which is why it makes sense that you feel overwhelmed, a bit confused, out of your depth, behind before you've even begun. And I want to reassure you that you're not alone in that feeling. And it's this gap in how students do feel compared to how they want to feel, this gap in the skills that we teach and the skills that you really need to know that led me away from academia and into founding my own research consulting company. So this is me I don't know why that photo's a little bit faded, but this is me about a year ago on my last day at UNSW. I had been there for 17 years and I'd worked my way up from being a baby lecturer to an assistant professor. I was the director of academic programs within the school, which is kind of like the education head. I'd run a research lab. I'd supervised more than 35 honors and PhD students through research projects. I taught thousands of students in big rooms and small rooms, and I just got a bit disillusioned with the whole thing. It no longer really felt like a place where I belonged, in part because that gap between what students want to feel and what they are feeling, what we teach them and what they really need to know, I saw that gap and it felt impossible to close it while working within a traditional academic institution. So I decided to step out of that system. Now, it turns out that identity change is a big thing, and it's taken me about a year to work out who I am if I'm not a traditional academic. But I've settled on my new mission is to help students who are new to research go from feeling like they've missed something that everybody else knows to feeling like they belong in research so that they can get through their research degree and onto the career that they actually want, whether that's going into academia and doing research for themselves, whether that's doing professional training programs and becoming a clinical psychologist, or whether that's into other industries where research training in psychology is so needed and useful. So I'm doing that via a new research consulting company that I'm calling Reveal Research. And I've set up 3 ways that I can support you in your research journey. Coaching, both one-on-one and in a group, where we work closely together in a targeted way to strategize what you need in terms of developing your skills as a researcher to succeed in this new context that you've found yourself in. The second is writing review, in which I can help you develop as a scientific writer, giving detailed audio feedback about a particular piece of work, whether that's an assessment, a thesis chapter, or your whole thesis. I read it like your marker will and record as I think and tell you what I think is working, what is not, and what I think you can do to make it land better. And then workshops like this, where we'll unpick the pieces of the hidden curriculum that I think are holding lots of students back. So I'm super excited to work with lots of you. I think that probably most of my clients will be psychology and STEM discipline students, but I'm keen to see what research looks like in other contexts too. So if you're interested to learn about how this all works, you can use my Calendly link to book a discovery call. All right, on to today. My gift for you today is what I'm thinking of as the overwhelm toolkit. So there's no doubt that starting a research project is big, right? In part because there is too much to keep track of. There is also a lot to read, and there's a lot of uncertainty about expectations in the interpersonal kind of realm with other people involved in your project, particularly your research supervisor. So what I want to do today is give you 3 tools that you can use to reduce overwhelm in those areas, gain yourself back some headspace, and save yourself some time down the track. So the first of these is there is too much to keep track of. So research projects are typically at least 12 months in duration. And in the case of a PhD, you're starting something that will take you 3 or 4 years to complete. So it's a universal truth that when you come to write up your thesis, whether you've been doing it for a year or 4 years, you will not remember how and why things came together the way they came together. Why did you make that decision? Where did that measure come from? How did you decide on that particular analysis method? What did your supervisor say about blah? And the key to writing up a really well-justified thesis is to have all of these details really well documented along the way. And so all these little decisions that you make along the way can take up a lot of headspace, and you need a way of keeping track of everything. So I recommend that today you find yourself a notebook and start what I call an everything notebook. Now, this is not my idea. This idea comes from a Mexican political science researcher. I'm blanking on his name. But the idea is that you create a place where you document your project in a way that creates headspace for current you and a resource for future you. So at minimum, it's a detailed record of your research work. So each day you fill in a daily log where you write about what did you do on your research project today? How did it go? What went well? What felt easy? What is good? What it felt bad? Where are you stuck? What is not good? And then most critically, what's next? So you want to park yourself on the downhill so that when you come back to your research the next time you do, which might not be tomorrow, you have parked yourself on the downhill and you can get started quickly without having to reconstruct where you were up to and what you were doing. And I think this particular part of it, reflecting on what's the next step that I need to make in order to make some progress, is the most important part of it, particularly when research is not the only thing that you are doing in your life, right? So most of you have family commitments, you have work commitments, you have other responsibilities, which means that you may not work on your research project every day. And when you come back to it, if you haven't kept a good note about, all right, what's the next step, it can be really hard to work out, where do I start, right? So at minimum, it's a record of the work that you do every day on your research project that creates some documentation that you can go back to when you're writing up. But at its best, it's a metacognitive learning tool. Now, the psychology people in the room will know that metacognition is the process of linking thinking about your thoughts and reflecting on your learning process, and that this thinking about thinking is a key predictor of effective learning. So the more that you can get inside your own head as you learn, the more quickly you'll come to understand the material that you're learning, and the better you'll get at reflecting on the process that you're taking to learn this new material and how effective that is, right? So this link takes you to some ideas for everything notebook prompts. So at minimum, you should do a daily log. That's a given. But there are other prompts in here that might be useful as well, right? So writing about what feels confusing and why you think that is. What did you avoid doing today? That's a really important one because procrastination is a signal, right? But if you shine a light on it, if you let it go on, it will slow you down. But if you shine a light on it and really unpick, okay, what did I avoid and why did I not want to do that? Then you're more likely to be able to to understand what's the next smaller step that will make me some progress. Right? So my recommendation is that every day you do a daily log, and every now and then you dip into these other metacognition prompts to really leverage that learning about your own learning, thinking about your own thinking for the benefit of coming to understand your research project better and yourself. Okay, so in addition to your daily log, you can create other sections as well. So you might want to keep your meeting notes with your supervisor here, reactions about what you're reading. My recommendation is that if one section that you definitely want to keep in your everything notebook is a section at the back about general discussion ideas. So even if you're just starting out on your research project, you want to be thinking about your general discussion now, and you can add ideas throughout the research process such that when you get to writing it, it kind of just writes itself. So these general discussion ideas will come to you as you read other research, as you watch your participants do your experiment, as you visualize your data, as you have discussions with your supervisor, and you just want to keep track of them, right? Because general discussion writing, it feels like the really big thing at the end, but if you've been thinking about it all the way along, it's actually not as difficult as you might think. So I have always kept analog everything notebooks, but that's because I'm old. There are lots of advantages to using digital tools as well. It's an absolute personal choice. Personally, I think writing things with a pen on paper, I tend to think about things differently than if I'm typing. I feel like thoughts just go quite as deep when I'm typing as when I'm writing. That's a personal thing. But of course, you want to make sure that you don't lose your analog version. The most important thing is to make it a habit. So even if you didn't do any official work on your research today, in all likelihood, you had some research related thought on the bus, and you just want to make sure that you log that in your everything notebook so that you don't lose track of that important idea. All right, problem number two. There is no doubt that there is too much to read. So the first solution to this problem is to use referencing software. So there are great open source options these days that will create you a database of all of the papers that you read or want to read. You can read within software like Zotero and highlight and keep notes within the software. And you can cite as you write. So you can link if let's say you're using Zotero, you can link Zotero to your Word document such that it makes it really easy to insert citations and they kind of format themselves. And then when you're ready to generate your reference list, it's a press of a button and it will auto magically generate you a reference list in a second. So I think it's kind of, no one really needs to know what APA style 7 is now because software just deals with it for you. So it doesn't matter which tool you use. I'm a fan of Zotero because it's open source and free, but yeah, choose a referencing software and start tracking what you're reading in it from the beginning. In addition to how to manage citations and referencing of what you read, managing the content of what you read is the hardest bit, right? So the most common questions I get about reading relate to how do I get my head around the literature? How do I become familiar with all of it? Or how do I find the gap in the literature? You're really trying to find that thing that nobody has done before. How do I know when I should stop? How do I know if I read enough? And what's the best way to keep notes about what I read? So my solutions to these questions are a tool that I call the reading matrix. So rather than writing notes about what you read in a notebook or in a Word document, I recommend taking notes in a spreadsheet. And the reason for this is that it allows you to see patterns in what you're reading. Essentially, what it means to get your head around the literature is that you're trying to extract the patterns in it. You're trying to see, okay, where are the consistencies and the methods that people are using? Where are the consistencies and inconsistencies in the results? Which studies are consistent with this theory and which studies are not, right? And it's hard to extract those patterns when you're keeping notes in a Word document down the page. But if you use a spreadsheet, you can find the link to this matrix spreadsheet template on the slide. If you use a spreadsheet, you can keep track of all the things that are interesting about a particular piece of research, such that one paper goes in each row, and you can make the columns of this matrix specific to your research question, right? So let's say your research is looking at factors that might moderate the relationship between stress and exam performance, right? You want to know what other moderating variables have research papers used to look at the relationship between stress and exam performance. And so you might want to add another column that pulls out from each paper what the moderating variable was and what the effect size was, right? I am a developmental psychologist and I study learning in babies. And so when I would set up a reading matrix like this, I was most interested in what was the age of the babies that were tested in the study, Um, what was the eye tracking task that they were tested on? But most interestingly for my research question is what was the dependent variable, right? What were they measuring from the eye tracking data? Because there was lots of loosey-goosiness about in our field about what the actual data point that you pulled out of this massive eye tracking data set, what that dependent variable was when you were talking about an index of learning. So I would add the baby's age, the task, and what was the measure that they were getting out of their eye tracking. All right, reading matrix, problem 2 solved. Okay, problem 3. There is a lot of uncertainty when it comes to navigating interpersonal stuff in this new research context, particularly with your research supervisor. So, this student supervisor relationship is a weird one, right? And it's not like any other professional relationship you've navigated before. It's not really like you're the employee and they're the boss, because you're not ever really told what to do like you would be in a workplace. But it's not really like you're the student and they're the teacher either, because there's no set curriculum, there's no right or wrong answers, and they're not telling you what you need to know. And the power differential within this relationship, I think, makes the idea of thinking of it as a mentee-mentor relationship also not quite right. Because whether we like it or not, your supervisor has a big influence on how well you do in the end. And I think this uncertainty in what is this relationship means that lots of students approach it with a mental model that doesn't quite fit, right? So you might come to it expecting to be told what you need to know and what you need to do, a bit like a teacher or a boss might. Or you might be reluctant to be really honest about what you don't know, because it feels a little bit like a performance review in a workplace. Or you might have trouble really advocating for what you need because the power differential in the room kind of makes that feel risky. Yeah. So I think good supervisors are those who behave a bit like an expert guide who helps you find your way to the answer. But we've got to be honest, not all supervisors are good at navigating that relationship either. They likely have a mental model of how supervision works that comes from how they were supervised. And there might be a mismatch in the way that they approach it and the way that it might work best for you. So that's why I recommend that early in your relationship, within the first kind of 3 meetings or so, you want to get some clarity about what you can expect by working in what I call a curious conversation into one of your early meetings. So you might want to start that with something along the lines of, I just want to make sure that I'm making the most of this time. Can we have a chat about how you see supervision working best? Now, before this meeting, you need to do some prep, right? So before you go in, you want to maybe get out your everything notebook and do a little reflection about how you work best when collaborating with others, how you typically react to feedback in other contexts, whether there are some skills that you're concerned that you might not have yet, and what you're most worried about in terms of navigating this relationship with your supervisor, right? And then once you have an idea of what you need out of the relationship, then you want to draft some surface questions to start, and then some deeper questions that you can use to kind of surface those implicit assumptions about how your supervisor sees your relationship working, right? Here's some examples. So you might want to start with surface stuff like, is email the best way for me to get in touch with you? And is it useful for me to send an outline of what I would like to talk about before our meeting or what we've decided after? And what is your approach to feedback? What will it look like and how long will it take, right? So you can ease in with this surface stuff. These are things that your supervisor is expecting you to ask and will have no trouble answering, right? Once you've kind of covered this logistics type questions, then you can move on to things that are a little bit deeper. So you might want to ask, what does good supervision feel like to you when it's working, right? And this might give you an idea of where your supervisor's approach to supervision comes from, what they think good supervision looks and feels like. What do your most successful students tend to do that helps them, right? So that's a way of asking, what do you want me to do without saying, what do you want me to do, right? It makes it clear to them that you want to be a successful student and that you want to know what successful students in the past have found helpful in interacting with them. Is there anything that you wish students asked earlier in the piece, right? So this is a question that kind of highlights that lots of students find it difficult to ask questions because they think, oh, that's going to sound stupid. And if there are lots of things that your supervisor would like you to ask, but you don't, right? And is there anything about how you work that would be helpful for me to know, right? And this is things like, I don't work on Wednesdays because I'm home with my preschooler, so don't expect email responses from me, right? And that's just going to be a thing that makes you less anxious or resentful about not getting a reply, right? Okay, making the most of your time with your supervisor is really important because you don't have a lot of it, right? So I've made a little supervision prep template that you might want to use before you go into each meeting, just to make sure that you're approaching each meeting mindful of what you need to get out of it, right? So maybe you need some feedback, maybe you need reassurance that you're on the right track, maybe you need help with a problem. But if you go into the meeting knowing that that's the outcome, then you'll be more focused in the moment. There's questions for you to prep where you're up to, what you're stuck on, and places that you can, after the fact, make notes about what you decided and what you're going to do before next time, right? So in the meeting, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing the important stuff and asking for what you need, right? And if it's useful for your supervisor, send a meeting summary about what was decided. I found that really helpful when I had a lot of students because you make a lot of commitments to a lot of people and you don't necessarily remember. All right, remember that supervisors are just people and they're brilliant, but they're busy people. They want to see you succeed, but their attention is drawn in many directions. A slow response shouldn't be taken personally. It's okay to follow up and make sure that the most important thing is to make it easy for your supervisor to help you. Okay, so I've got 3 things you can download from this link that are going to help reduce this overwhelm. And I think there is a misconception there's a pervasive idea that success in this context is just about hard work. And I like this idea that actually keeping balance is what makes you productive as a researcher, right? Making sure you're sleeping and getting exercise. Those are the basics for well-being, yeah? But what I would add to this pie chart is the extra pieces that are also making you more productive and successful are asking for help when you're stuck, bouncing ideas around with someone who knows, and getting really good feedback, right? So that's where reveal comes in. There is way too much gatekeeping in research training, and there's no need to work it out by trial and error or by yourself. I'm here to support you via coaching or writing review, and you can get links to some frequently asked questions and a demo of how the writing review works on the slide there. We have about 6 or 7 minutes for any questions that you might have in this moment. So pop questions in the chat or turn your mic on and say hi. Questions? Anybody? There's a prize for someone who's brave enough to ask a question. I haven't worked out what that is yet. Anybody?
Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
Hi. Can ask a very rude question, but it's one I'm sure everyone's or many people are wondering, which is what is the cost of your services?
Yeah, yeah. So writing review takes me about an hour to do the kind of audio feedback that I do. For about 1,500 words, it takes me about an hour. So it's $150 for 1,500 words, and then it's like per words going up from that. Coaching, I have packages. So the more sessions you purchase, the cheaper it is. Averages out about $180 an hour.
Mhm.
Workshops for the moment, while I'm getting started, are free. Um, yeah, but you can find those details in the frequency asked questions and on my website. All
Great.
right, we have a couple
Thank
of
you.
questions in the chat. Would you recommend actually storing our files within Zotero? I've used Zotero in a couple of different ways. Sometimes I have a folder of downloaded PDFs that I just drag into there, in which case everything is attached. And when I do that, I actually quite like reading in Zotero because it all keeps it in one place. Um, I don't know that there's any downsides to having your PDFs within Zotero. There's lots of convenience, and yeah, I would put them all in there. Um, Tips for handling multidisciplinary teams. Ooh. KH, that's a big one. So I think that when you're working in a team environment, particularly when people come from different backgrounds, those communication, those curious conversations that you have are really, really important because there's an extra layer of lack of expectations, um, understanding of expectations that are in there, right? So I would recommend just being really proactive about communicating what your understanding of this is to make sure that it's matching against these other people's perspectives, right? Um, um, Mentally is good. I agree, David. It's the other one I would recommend. Lucy, what does the next session cover? Yes. Oh, it's not loading. Somebody else told my website was not loading yesterday, which is unfortunate. Next time, we're going to talk about particularly introduction writing and how to set up a sense of perceptual fluency for your reader, right? So you want your marker to be nodding and smiling as they read, and you do that by setting it up expectations and delivering on them, and then by making the moves that your markers are expecting. So next time I'm going to put my marker hat on. I have marked, I don't know, hundreds of honest theses in my time. So I have a pretty good idea of what your marker's looking for, and I can tell you what that is. Andrea has her hand up in the 2.5 minutes we have
Jenny.
left.
Okay. I guess, what's the turnaround time of the verbal feedback
Yeah,
that you provide on the work?
yeah. So um, up to a couple of thousand words, I can do in like 24 to 48 hours. If you want a whole thesis chapter or your whole thesis, it's going to take me 3 or 4 days. Yeah. But on that, you want to leave yourself enough time, right? So it'll take me like a few days, but I'm going to send you um, 5, 10, however, 10-minute recordings that you need to listen to and then integrate. So you don't want to leave it super last minute um, because there's time on your end as well. Yeah. Um, cool. All right. I have a couple of things here. So thank you for coming, everybody. I want to see pictures of your everything notebooks all set up. So email those to me at revealresearchcoach@gmail.com. As Lucy was saying, we have a workshop in 2 weeks all about introduction writing. And then another one 2 weeks after that I haven't decided on yet. So I need your help. Do you want to hear about data management for beginners or about how to stop dreading your discussion? Can you put your preference in the chat so that I can decide what is next? Oh, there's a lot of interest in data management. Anybody? Okay. Oh, a couple of discussions. Um, Question from Vladimir. Is there scope for sessions and coaching for postdocs? Absolutely, right? So if you are in the middle of a research project and need help strategizing how you can be effective and make progress, then coaching is for you. So definitely flick me a message. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. It's so great to see you. Until next time. Catch you later.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Jenny. Great. Thank
Jenny.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Hi,
Hi.
I'm Sita. Yeah, nice to meet you. I sent you email before. Yeah,
Oh,
thank
I
you.
probably haven't checked it because I was like
Yeah,
sharing
that's
stuff,
okay.
but I'll go look.